Good afternoon, everybody. I understand I've got about an hour. Now, I ain't going to be speaking for an hour, so what I like to do is talk for about 30 to 40 minutes, and the bit that I really like the best is the question and answers, because I think that you'll probably get a lot more feedback from that. Now, I'm going to split my talk into three sections. I'm going to, first of all, tell you a bit about my life, my story, how then I created the Black Farmer brand, and then the most important thing to me, it's about marketing. You cannot ever build any business or any brand unless you understand the power of marketing. And all too often, people within our industry see that marketing is something that is poo-pooed, that is boasting, but that is not the case. It's fundamental to grow anything. Right, so if I go right back to the beginning of my story, I was born in Jamaica, and for those of you who don't know the island, I was born in a place called Frankfield, Clarendon. And if you went there today, you would see quite a lot of subsistence farmers actually working the land. And a lot of people from the Caribbean actually originally came from rural backgrounds. What happened is that when they were invited to come to this country, they went to where the work was, which was in the cities, but they're from rural backgrounds. Now, in my case, my parents decided to settle in Birmingham, and I was brought up in a place called Small Heath in Birmingham. Now, I don't know if there's anybody here from Birmingham, I doubt it, or Small Heath in Birmingham, but the only thing I can say about that place is that it was a shithole. It was fucking awful. It is one of the, I mean, it's been ages since I lived there, and I still sort of have shivers of actually being brought up in that sort of environment. Now, there are 11 of us in my family. I've got 8 brothers and sisters, and I want you to imagine this, 11 people living in a 2-up, 2-down. As a kid, there was 3 to a bed, and we were very, very, very poor. And my father, as a way of subsidizing the family income, had an allotment. And it was my responsibility as the oldest boy to look after this allotment. And this allotment really became my oasis away from the bloody misery that I was living in. I mean, there's nothing worse than continuously having to look over your shoulder because somebody might be sticking a knife in your bloody back or something like that. So the allotment was a fantastic space for me. And this is where my story starts. Now, one of the things you're going to be hearing in this talk is about the courage to be audacious, the courage to think big, the courage to dream big. And again, if I was talking to an American audience, they would really understand the idea that you could actually reach above from where you're from. And I think that in business, it's very, very important to have that audacious mindset. The title of this talk is called Jeopardy, the Danger of Playing It Safe. And if anybody wants to find out more about what I'm saying today, there's a book that I've written of the same title that would tell you about how important it is to be audacious. And I can remember, as an 11-year-old boy, I was only 11 years old, and I made myself a promise that one day I would like to own my own farm. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but it was a dream that I'd lodged in the back of my mind, and everything that I subsequently did in my life was to try and achieve that dream. Now, it took me some 35 years to do it, but you know, the most important thing is that you got to dream it, and I'm going to tell you how I did it. Now, in those days, I went to what they called secondary moderns. I think they're now called comprehensives, but I went to the local secondary modern school in Small Heath in Birmingham. And this school was as much of a shithole as a place that I actually brought up in. The teachers hated being there. The kids hated being there. They didn't really educate us. They policed us because there was no real expectation that we'd really achieve much in our lives. And to make matters even worse is that I'm dyslexic. And in those days, people had absolutely no idea of what dyslexia was. They just couldn't understand how could somebody that looks normal couldn't really grasp some of the the absolute basics in life. And it's one of my great passions about actually how do we support those people with dyslexia, because even today there is still a lack of understanding of what dyslexia is. And I see dyslexia as a gift, because actually it means that if you've got that, you have to think outside the box. And the people who innovate, the people who bring change, are the people who are able to think outside the box. So I left school at 16. I could hardly read and write, had no qualifications at all. And because I wanted to get away from home, because, you know, bloody 3 to a bed ain't that comfortable, the only option that I had actually was to then join the army. So you can imagine a black guy in those days with a bit of a mouth joining the army. There's only one thing that was going to happen, which is that you're going to get your head kicked in. So they spent bloody years trying to sort of kick me into shape, but eventually I got kicked out of the army. So the only qualification that I have to my name is a dishonorable discharge from the army. So I'm 18 years old. I got kicked out of the army. Yeah, I seem to be going down the road that people predict for people like me from my sort of background, those of us who are on society's dustman heap, as I call it. And what was quite interesting is that in those days, if you were a failure at everything, they just thought, oh shit, what do we do with them? So I went to the local catering college in Halesowen. They just thought, well, he could wash up pots and pans and, you know, do something in the kitchen. And luckily, the catering college that I went to, I really enjoyed doing a bit of cooking, and I eventually did my qualifications, and I went on to work in various restaurants and hotels. Nowhere glamorous, and in those days, chefing was not a glamorous profession. So I worked as a chef. Now, at that time when I was working as a chef, and I want you to keep remembering that I've got this thing in the back of my mind that one day I want to buy my farm. So I don't want to settle. I don't want to just accept something and think that's going to be it. And at the time, there was a really fantastic BBC program on documentaries. They made documentaries, 40 minutes, made social documentaries. I used to love this program. And I could remember saying to all of my family and friends, you know what? I want to go and get a job in the BBC as a producer-director. Again, being audacious. And everyone looked at me and thought, this guy's nuts. You know, he could hardly read and write, has no qualifications. TV then, and in these days, is very much the profession for the Oxbridge types. Now, if there's anything I want you to take away from this conversation today, is this. I'm a fundamental believer that you only need 2 things to achieve anything that you want in life. And any successful person you will meet and you will see, they will have these 2 things. Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter on your sex, it doesn't matter on your education, it doesn't matter on your background. All you need is these 2 things. The first thing is that you need to be ruthlessly focused. And what I mean about being ruthlessly focused is that you're able to get rid of the white noise of living. Far too many people's lives are full of shite, things that don't really matter. And I think the only time people tend to actually get to that point of really understanding that is that they're really sick. When you're sick and then, you know, your options become narrow, you then work out what is important. Another part of my story is that I had acute myeloid leukemia about 7 years ago. My skin, for example, is a consequence of that. And people do not survive leukemia. A lot of people actually die. And one of the reasons I'm here is because of good science, good timing, and a lot of prayer. You know, I should not be here having this conversation with you. But what it actually does, it helps me to understand that focus about what is important in your life is so important. And so many people underestimate the importance of focus. So focus is the first thing. But the second thing is far, far more important than the first. And that is you have to have passion. You have to have passion. And people say to me, well, what do you mean by passion? Well, passion defies logic. Passion doesn't make sense. Passion helps you get over all of the hurdles that will come your way. And all those people who make decisions based on evidence are the ones that are always trapped. And I say, look, to try and understand the power of passion, it says, have you ever seen somebody when they're in love? They do fucking crazy stuff. They do things that do not make sense. They are driven. They are driven, and that is what you need. You need that bit of magic that everybody, look, this person is just off their rocker. If you do not have that, and you're working on reason and logic as the way of doing things, you'll always be actually behind the curve. So you need to have focus, and you need to have passion. So with those two ideals, I thought, right, I want to get a job at the BBC. So I did all the sort of classic stuff that people do. I wrote to people. Nobody answered my letters. I tried ringing them. Nobody would take my calls. I was living in Birmingham at the time, and there was a place called BBC Pebble Mill. So I thought, right. I went up to the BBC Pebble Mill, and they used to have security guards who used to let people in and out of these buildings. And these security guards had a little hut where they had to get out to open the bloody barriers to let people in, and they hated doing that. So I said to them, look, I'll do that for you, and I'll do that for nothing. And they thought, well, you know, this guy's crazy enough to do it. Let him do it. And so for fucking months, I'm out there sort of lifting the barrier up and down, letting people in and out of the building for months. And then from there, I then met the cleaners who were cleaning the offices. And I said, look, can I help you clean the offices? And they said, well, yeah, you want to do it for nothing, come along. So I was cleaning the offices, and then this happened. I can remember meeting a guy, and I still remember his name now. His name was Jock Gallagher. And I was saying to him, look, I want to get a job in television, etc. And he said, look, come up to his office. And I went up to his office, and he spoke to me for about an hour. And he says, look, you're not the type of person we employ in television because you don't have the education, you've got a bit of an attitude problem, you're just not the sort of person. And he said, look, I will do this. I will give you a job as a runner, which means you do all the shit that nobody else wants to do, as a runner for 3 months and then to see what happens. Now, that man, having the courage to give me that break, then started a long career in television. And so one of the things I always say to people as well is this: find your guardian angels. Find your guardian angels. Every single thing that I've succeeded in, somebody has gone out of their way to give me a break. And you will not find those people unless you are prepared to put it out there. Again, one of the things about being British is that people tend to be reserved. They're trying to close it in. But the people who are there to help you cannot help you unless they know. So I want you to picture this. So there's a black guy who could hardly read and write. He's there at the BBC. I start off as a runner. I then went on to be a researcher. And then I went on to be a producer-director. Now, I don't know, some of you might be old enough in this audience to remember, back in the day, there used to be a very famous program called the Food and Drink Program with Gilly Gordon and Oz Clarke, and we traveled around the world making sort of food programs. Well, I was a producer on that program. And another guardian angel, a guy called Peter Bassinger, made it. That was my job to break in all of these big-name celebrity chefs. It was that program that started the celebrity chef culture. So people like Gordon Ramsay, I gave him his first break in television, James Martin, all these big chefs, it was my job to break them in. Because my boss at the time knew that all these Oxbridge types were quite intimidated by these guys, because these guys were from the sort of the same side of the street as I was from, and you know, they'll take you outside to sort of problem out if they didn't like what you were saying. And my boss knew that I was the sort of person that would oblige. So I could tell you some fantastic stories about when I had Gordon Ramsay come into my house, because in those days we used to shoot film. Not like we got bloody video. We used to shoot film, and film was very, very expensive, and so everybody had to be really well disciplined, so you're wasting film. So I had to coach them how to perform in front of film. So I'd get people like Gordon Ramsay to come to my flat to cook me Sunday lunch so we could practice what it's like in front of the camera, things like that. So all of those guys, I gave them the first break, and I traveled the world making programs about food and drink. And I was at the BBC for about 15 years. And you would think that coming from my background, you think the thing to do now, boy, is shut the fuck up, keep your head down, be really, really grateful, because you know it's better from where you actually come from. And there's a lesson to all of you here, and it is this: the moment you stand still is the moment you're in serious trouble. There's some fantastic stories about businesses who actually dominated a sector. I think Kodak may be one of the most famous ones. Dominated film. They just thought, we're making so much money, Why do we need to innovate? I think the story goes that they were the people who actually, in fact, discovered digital videos in their own labs, but they actually took their eye off the ball because they was making so much money in film. I think eventually came iPhone, Apple iPhone, and they went out of business. So there's a wonderful Steve Jobs quote, which is stay hungry, because the moment you stand still, somebody like me, hungry, is there ready to actually snap at your heels and get what they want. So, and the thing that keeps you hungry is to make sure you have in the back of your mind, what is your focus? What you're trying to achieve? And because I wanted to buy a farm, I knew that as wonderful and as glamorous that the BBC was, I was never going to be able to earn the money that you need just to buy somewhere. So I knew that if I was going to be true to that dream, I'd have to leave the BBC and actually start my own business. And at that time, obviously, my expertise then was about sort of food and drink. And so I decided I would launch my own food and drink marketing agency. Now, I love doing these talks, especially for people who are just about thinking about going into business. And most people live in survival mode. They're not really living the life that they want, because actually the one thing that holds them back is fear, the power of fear. Those of us who run our businesses will know the only thing that makes us different to most people is not that we don't feel the fear, is that we're understanding it's part of what we need to accept if you're running a business. And I say to people, the most important, what people are always looking for is certainty. The only thing that is certain is that there's no such thing as certainty. You actually have to learn, how do you make a friend of uncertainty? I say to people, you put your arms around uncertainty, you walk forward, and you say, well, we're going in that direction with all the uncertainty, and things will come along, things will stop you. But rather than actually standing down and planning beforehand, is to say, well, I do not know what I'm going to see, but whatever comes my way, I will find a way to get over it. So do not think you need to know all the answers. All you need to do is have the mindset that whatever comes, it's about solving problems. Success in business is not about having a great plan, it's about solving problems. And it's a mindset that you're not afraid of the problems, you're not afraid of the uncertainty, you will find a way of actually dealing with it. So I decided that I was going to leave the BBC, this massive security. I remember that I only had enough money to pay my mortgage for 3 months. After 3, I had no clients, I had nothing. And there's nothing that focuses your mind more than knowing that, you're going to have no bloody food on the table after 3 months. But again, if you put it out there, I'm a fantastic believer that if you put it out there, the right people will come your way. Now, I can remember that when we started, so we had brands, the brands that we launched, are big brands now, were brands like Lloyd Grocery Sauces, Kettle Chips, Plymouth Gin. The guy who actually was behind Plymouth Gin then went on to do Fever Tree. That guy is a rich bastard now. When he sort of came to us, I can remember him telling me about Fever Tree, but all of those guys came to work with us because they were hungry. So it was what we call challenger brands. So brands who want to go in and dominate a character, they're allowed to behave and do things sort of differently. So when you look at those brands now, big, back in the day when we were working on those brands, they were really challenging and trying to get into their category. So I ran that business for 15 years, and then that gave me the money to buy my farm. And so when I go around and I do this talk, especially at schools, I don't swear, but I say dream fucking early, because it takes a long time. It takes a long time to achieve your dreams. A lot of people think that it's something that it's instant. It isn't. It's a grind. It's a marathon, and you've got to prepare yourself for the marathon. So I decided that I was going to buy a farm, and my farm is on the Devon-Cornwall border. And when I say a farm, it's not like you guys, you've got bloody proper farms. Mine's only 30 acres, and it'd be regarded as a small holding. And it's on the Devon-Cornwall border near Launceston, or Lanston, as they keep telling me I need to say down there, Lanston. And again, it was part of a dairy farm, and a lot of people were getting out of farming because farming is pretty tough. I'm a great believer it is outsiders who see opportunity. One of the things you have to ask yourself in your business is, do you have the outside mentality? Our industry tends to be very, very cliquey. It tends to be speaking to themselves. But in terms of seeing where opportunities are, is to have that sort of outsider antennae. So when I bought this farm, the first thing that I sort of saw is this massive gap between urban and rural Britain. It's as though we're living in different countries. People are just, it's extraordinary. Even today, there's a real lack of understanding of two of the worlds. So, and that's where I saw the opportunity. I thought, right, I want to create a brand that A, is going to bridge that gap and really start a conversation with urban and rural. And the other thing I wanted to do was to make sure I did a brand that was going to be a mainstream brand. One of the things about being black is the moment you're ethnic, they think, shit, all you could do is sort of provide things for the ethnic market. Didn't want to do that. I thought, right, I want a brand that's going to say something that is going to appeal to the mainstream and to have a real purpose behind it. And I thought, right, what shall I start off doing with? I thought, right, you know what? I'm going to do sausages. Everybody knows about sausages. You can't get anything more bloody mainstream than a sausage. And then it was then trying to find the gap. When we're doing a business, because there's tons of sausages out there, where is the gap in the sausage market? And I did a bit of research, and the research says something like 1 in 100 people have some sort of wheat intolerance. So if for the average family, there'd be someone in that family that couldn't eat things with wheat in it, and a lot of sausages at the time had cereal in it, and that's where I saw the gap. I thought, right, if I could produce a product that could be eaten by the mainstream, but also the people who have this celiac disease, they could eat that as well, then actually that is a solution for the whole family. Now, everything about the Black Farmer is a white label model. We don't make anything. Because what we want to do is that we want to focus on what we're good at, which is sales and marketing. But again, I went out and I searched and I found a manufacturer who thought, right, I'll give this crazy black guy an opportunity. That helped me develop the product. So we developed a sausage, a gluten-free sausage. And then the next thing was to come up with a brand name. Now, people spend fortunes trying to come up with the right brand name. And I was scratching my head for bloody months thinking, what the hell am I going to call this brand? And then one day it came to me. All of my next door neighbors used to call me the Black Farmer. And I thought, shit, that's a pretty good brand name. Not only is it a really good brand name, it's got an edge to it. People are not too sure about whether it's politically correct or not. They're just a bit wary. Can you say that? Is that the right thing to do? And when you're marketing, that is a sweet spot you want. You want that double take moment. Whoa, can you do that? You can't push them too far, but it is that sort of moment. But even I was slightly a bit sort of concerned about it. I said, and this is going to be really important to all of you who live and die on research. I thought, right, look, the sensible thing to do is to research it. So I sent it out for research, and all the research came back and says, do not call it the Black Farmer, because people will be offended. And the lesson is this. Research would tell you what people were thinking yesterday. Research would tell you what people are thinking today. But research cannot tell you what people are thinking tomorrow. That's why all you have is your values, your principles, your conviction, and your go forward. And therefore, by going forward, people will eventually follow you. Because I can remember at the time, I decided I'm going to go with the Black Farmer. At the time, some people did complain to the racial equality and things like that, saying that it was racist. This is a true story, this is. Somebody had written in a complaint, because we do bacon as well. And one of the things that I was trying to publicize is that our bacon, you know, sometimes the cheap bacon has got that white slime on it. It's pretty disgusting. And so my strag line was no white bits. And somebody... And somebody just thought I was being racist because it is a sort of condemning white people. But it just goes to show that people have the wrong idea about things. Anyhow, so I decided to call it the Black Farmer. And then because I wanted this to be a mainstream brand, I thought, right, I want to get these into the supermarkets. Now, everything you've heard about the supermarkets is true. They're fucking bastards. They are brutal. And I can remember going to all of the supermarkets trying to get these sausages listed. And they look at these sausages and they say, well, sausages, are these sausages for black people? The idea that a black guy could have a mainstream British brand, they didn't understand it. Now, one of the things that I'm really, really interested in is this. The supermarkets are the gatekeepers to the relationship with the consumer. And I believe, and our experience is this, is that what you need to do is that you need to, how to get a direct relationship with the consumer. That is the most important thing that everybody needs to understand. So when all the supermarkets said no, I said, right, I'm going to do a massive tour around the country and all of the counter shows and all that sort of stuff. I would go around and do sampling of my sausages. At the same time, and again, when you're starting up, you have to be maverick. You do not play by the rules. It's a street fight. You know, I break all the rules. And so what I did is that on my website, I put all the names of all the buyers and their telephone numbers on my website. And when people would try these sausages and they'd love them, I said, look, if you really like them, go onto my website and email or write to the buyers directly and say, why aren't you listing this guy's sausages? And as God is my witness, that's how we got our listing. Because the only people that the retailers fear are the consumers. It's to understand that if you get the consumers on your side, they are your sales force. And especially if you're a brand and that you're a real person, consumers really get behind that. They really feel as though they've got some sort of ownership in it. And that for us as a business, you know, we look after our consumers like no one else because we know we are there because of them and they're the ones that have the power. How does a brand like the Black Farmer have listings in all of the supermarkets? We're even in the likes of Marks and Spencer's, you know. They don't do brands, so why? Because actually the consumers is something that we really, really focus on getting on our side, and they've been fantastic for us. Now, the brand has been going now for 15 years. As I said, we're in all of the supermarkets, and we started off in sausages and we branched out into other product ranges. When we launched the brand, the whole idea was for this brand to become a brand that could be exported around the world. And about a year ago, we then decided to do our online farm shop. And because ultimately what I'm trying to do, which I'm just in the process of doing now, is to have a bricks and mortar venue, something like this, called the Black Farmer Experience, where people could go and get great food. There'd be a farm shop, there'd be a wedding venue, there'd be a conference room, and it would be the Black Farmer Experience. So that's what we're actually in the process of doing now. And so this online shop that we've just launched is like a pilot to get us for us to understand consumer behavior. So if anybody now goes onto the Black Farmer website, what we're doing is that we're expanding out into a lifestyle brand, because one of the things that I sort of noticed is a lot of people went into these box schemes, and most of them are not around anymore. I was talking to the people at Farm Drop. A lot of these people who there was a bit of a spike about, oh, this is the right thing to do, and found out actually it's a bloody inconvenience for customers, and therefore what is it about you that's going to allow the customers to not only trust you, but spend a bit more money for you to be able to send their products? So we're starting to do that, but we're offering them a much wider range. So they're buying into the Black Farmer sort of lifestyle brand. And also what it does, it means that we could have a direct relationship with our customers. Because, you know, if you've got the supermarkets that own that relationship, it's very, very difficult for you to have a conversation with them. And the technology around now is so sophisticated in terms of really understanding your customer. It's really exciting. I just want to finish off by saying this. I think it is a fantastic time for anybody to go into business because the world has changed. And the world has changed in terms of people want to have relationships. One of the things that was really interesting listening to Rose's talk is that she's absolutely right. The big boys don't have time for relationships. If you are the size of businesses that we are, the edge you have is how to actually have relationships. In my business, the rule of thumb is everybody has to do customer service. Doesn't matter what your level is, not about training, you all have to do it. So they understand that the person who's putting food on the table is that customer, and they do it. Also, the other thing that pisses me off in this day and age for all these bloody young people here, the thing that is so precious to people is picking up the bloody phone and talking to people. These day and age, they're sending texts and they're sending messages. But the delight on someone when they say, oh my God, somebody's actually gone through the trouble of picking up the phone and talking to me. All too often, people think it's just about the product. You have to have a great product. But if you rely on that as the reason why people are going to buy into you, you will fail. It's those people who understand the importance and the power of relationships. So something as simple as picking up the phone and helping a lady through an order. Now that woman is going to go and tell all of her friends, she's going to tell all of her people. It's to understand that if you invest into relationships, it will pay back. Thank you very much.
So we're going to have a similar Q&A session again. So we've got 2 roving mics going around. So please catch my eye or the eye of Rachel or Sophie with the mics. Same again, you could stand up, speak loud and clear, your name, the company, and a short question for Wilfred. So who wants to kick us off?
How old were you in your life when you realised that dyslexia was a gift? Because I believe the same.
Well, the one thing that I regret is that I spent so much time when I was younger being ashamed of being dyslexic and therefore having to find ways of covering it up. And if I'd put the energy in being proud of it, I'd probably been much further ahead in my success. The only reason I can now proudly talk about it is because I'm successful. And, but for a very, very, very long time, I spent most of my time trying to hide it. So what I would like to do is to get to a place, especially in our educational system, where we could actually identify those, because dyslexia is just a different form of learning. It's not a handicap, it just means that you take a bit longer and actually to see that these people have a particular gift. Because as I say, you've got to think outside the box. And why is it that so many people who are successful businessmen come from a dyslexic, are dyslexic? And that's because their brains have had to therefore look at problems in a different way, and they come up with different sort of solutions. Just a theme from that as well is that the role, we live in what I call the right brain and left brain society. It's the left brainers that rule our society. You know, it's all about rational, like the bloody there's a lot of accountants and solicitors and all that here. You know, the fearmongers. These are the ones who really dominate. And then you have the right brainers, who are the ones who are innovative, that are imaginative. Those are the people who change the world. Because it's about, it is about audacity. It's not about what sort of makes sense. So I say to this, there's going to come a time when everybody's going to be saying, look, I'm dyslexic, because they'll be able to see that with that, people are going to be tapping into those skills that are unique. So all I could say is this, that it's a fantastic gift. And it's nice to find that somebody else in the room is dyslexic as well.
Thank you, Wilfred. Jude McCann from the Farming Community Network, a charity supporting farmers, farming families across England and Wales. I just wanted to ask, how can we encourage our supermarkets and our general public to start to appreciate farmers and our food producers?
Well, what needs to happen in the farming industry is what happened in the catering industry. It was the cult of the celebrity chefs that made a lot of people see that catering is a great profession to go into. We need to sex up our industry, because the image for most people is that actually it's full of old men, people who are not part of the mainstream, and that how do we get people, is that mine? No, it's not. How do we get people, I just thought, shit, as he put his alarm on. How do we, so even having Jeremy Clarkson doing his program, that is a help. And I think that young chef that came out of that is a help. So part of what we need to sort of recognize is that we also need to go about bringing about change, because we're a bit insular. We've got to sort of reach out rather than expect people to sort of come to us. And one of the things I'm really passionate about, because I'm also a trustee at the Cirencester Agricultural University, and also I'm involved with Whitley Agricultural College. And what I'm trying to do is to get those guys to give people from urban environments a taster of what it's like to sort of work and live in rural Britain. Because the truth is, if you're from my background, you don't know. You just don't know. And it may be that if you then had a taster of it, you might think, actually, I prefer this than to be stuck in this poxy job that I've got there. I get more enjoyment out of it. So I just think there is a lot more that we can do in terms of actually opening our arms to people who are going to bring innovative ideas rather than the same old-fashioned ideas.
Isaac from AHDB Agri Leader. Sorry, Simon, I've got two. First of all, asking for a friend, where did you get your shirt from?
Oh, right.
Secondly, so now, you talk about the edge that an outsider view give you. How as an industry do we embrace diversity that will give us that edge of an outsider's view?
Well, first of all, I got this shop from a small company as well, you see. It's, I'll have to give you the name. I think it's called Flowery Mansion. They do some fantastic shirts. They're a small business, and they started a few years ago. A husband and wife couple did it. Fantastic, you see. And it's really interesting, because what I'm now telling you is their story. I'm saying it was a husband and wife story, and that just makes you feel more connected to them. And so I do like their stuff. So that's where I got my shirt from. So, and then the second part of the question was about actually how do we encourage more diversity? Is that what you were saying? Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, the thing about farming is this: is that we know that diversity is essential. You have to rotate your crop. You have to. You can't have interbreeding going on with your animals. So we know that diversity is important. What is it we can do to sort of encourage people to come into it? Now, the truth of the matter is this, is that if you're from a non-farming background, it's almost impossible to get into farming, because actually a lot of the farms are handed down through the generation. So the only way you can get into farming is if you earn a shitload of money and you'll be able to buy land, or if you're able to lease and rent. So one of the things that I'm advocating, for example, is people like the Church of England owns a lot of land. There's the National Trust own a lot of land. There are a lot of institutions that own land. And I would be saying to these guys, look, what you should be doing is say 5%, 10% of that land, you should be targeting for new entrants. And it's not necessarily black people. I'm just saying people outside of the farming community who want to learn an opportunity to sort of develop. How could they get access to land in order to do that? So that's one of the things I think these institutions could be doing, because all they do is that it's about laziness. So they get their land agents to, lease their land out to the sort of normal group of people. And we just need them to actually do a bit more to the greater good. So I think there's a lot of institutions within our industry that could be doing a lot more for the greater good. Because when you think of the amount of food that we import into this country, especially for the ethnic minorities who eat these specialist exotic foods that can be grown in this country, if those people were allowed access, we could be growing those things in this country, which would be good for our own economy. But those people want to be able to get in, but it's really, really difficult to sort of get in. So I just think we need to find avenues to make it easy for them to start into this industry.
Hi, Lizzie McLaughlin, Farmers Weekly and the Boots and Heels podcast.
Oh yes, you did an interview with me.
I did.
Yeah, I remember,
Hi.
yes.
So
It
you
was
probably
really
know
nice.
I'm not from a farming background,
Oh,
which
yes, I
is
remember.
something that we chatted about. And you talk a lot about agricultural colleges and universities, which I didn't know existed till I came in the industry. Do you think we should be educating in kind of non-farming universities and colleges and schools as well? And what piece of advice would you give to young people who maybe want to get in the industry but don't know how to?
Yeah, I absolutely. What I think should be part of the every school child's curriculum is to go and visit a farm, because in order to get people to appreciate farmers and appreciate where their food comes from, we need to educate. I ran something called the Black Farmer Scholarship before I got ill, and the idea was that people would come down to my farm so they could get a taste there, and if they like it, then they could go into the agricultural colleges. And I was just amazed at the lack of knowledge that people had, these kids had. And we're talking about 16, 17-year-olds, about where their food comes from. There was no knowledge at all. And again, one of the things I keep advocating is this. Part of the problem that we have in our industry is that it was the supermarkets that had the relationship with the consumer. And farmers have never had to have that relationship. We need to change that. The moment farmers start to have relationships with the consumer, we will start to see things changing. If you look at the rest of Europe, you look at France, for example, there is a lot more respect for the farmers in that country than there is in this country. And what we need to actually understand is that we need to get urban Britain on side, because if we get them on side, they could help bring about the change that is so necessary and for people to understand what we do. So if you started off by actually all school children at least once a year has to go down and actually visit a farm. Schools should be linked with farms. We try and actually connect rather than separate. I believe that's a very, very important thing for the future. What's going to be really interesting with this crisis in Russia and Ukraine, and it was definitely going to happen, is that globalization made people think that actually there were certain countries that could actually produce stock and therefore others couldn't. So Ukraine, obviously, when it wasn't at war, was ideal for doing wheat. But now that, that's all going to pot, we're then having to look at actually what is it that we could do in this sort of country. And I think that what we need to actually revisit is that our own food security is very, very, very important. And rather than relying on globalization to feed us, is that what more can we be doing to be self-sustaining? And what more can we be doing to be encouraging new blood into the industry? Because that's how we're going to get innovation. And that's how we're going to get a better connection between urban and rural.
Hi, Wilfred. Yeah, it is working. I'm Harry. I'm the placement student at SRH next year. You talk a lot about how stories can be a really good way to bridge the gap between those urban communities and British farming. How do you think we can actually get those stories out there, though, and properly be heard rather than just to a small number of people?
Well, the first thing is that people need to understand the power of stories, because one of the things, a lot of people approach me all the time about wanting to start up their own business and their own brand. And I would guarantee you most of those business and most of those business ideas will not be connected to them. It'll be something, it'll be like, oh God, what was the last one that I had? Anyhow, I can't think of the right words, but what I always say to people is this: the thing that makes it unique is you. What is it that's unique about you that will then tell the stories? It's easy. So if you think about the power of social media, and any communication is all about stories. And if you take something like TikTok, for example, the big revolution you have in TikTok, and that is people telling their stories. There's one TikTok that I'm really sort of obsessed with, whereas this guy, all he does is change his horse's shoes, and he's taking you through how he does that and all that. So that's why I'm saying that if you understand that everybody's in search for these stories, that is the one thing that you have, because my story is unique to me. And it's understanding what is it that is unique to you. You then tell that rather than create something outside of yourself. The rule of business in the past was never to connect things personally. That world has now changed, because if you live in a world where people are looking for stories, well, stories about you, your life, your personality. So I think that within the industry, generally, is that we need to shift from actually thinking, well, we just come up with a brand name and we just actually do this. That will not sell. It's about thinking, what is it that is personal about you? Because it's stories that people buy. Hopefully that helps you.
Do we have any more questions? We've got another couple of minutes if there's another couple of questions at all. There's one at the back and one at the front. Do you want to go to the one at the back?
Hi, I'm Sam from Hills Green. Obviously, the Black Farmers is a fantastic brand, but if you were starting a game with sort of little to no following, what would be the first sort of 1 or 2 steps that you'd take to get that brand off the ground?
So at the moment, there is, what I love doing is I love creating brands. I run something called The Hatchery, and you'll see some stuff about it on the website. So when somebody comes to me with an idea, if I like them and I like the idea, we will develop that brand from scratch. And I've got a couple of big successes at the moment. So a guy in his 50s, he originally came to me for a job. And I says, no, I'm not going to give you a job, but what we'll do is that we create a brand together. And because he knew a lot about the Nordic countries, and also I thought, well, why don't we create a brand called Smorgasbord? And because we've taken his experience, his passion about anything Nordic, we create a brand called Smorgasbord. And the gap is that if people want Swedish meatballs, they have to go to IKEA. So we could say, well, we could create something where they don't have to go to IKEA and they could get it from this brand. So that's one. A guy came to me with an idea for, said beef jerky. And I says, no. And he was into, his big passion was in high protein. So all these muscle guys who go around and sort of all into sort of high protein. And I said, right, so why don't we create a brand called The Gym Kitchen? These brands are now mega. I mean, there's 6-7 million brands after only 2 years. and that's taking his passion, his interest, seeing where the gap is and going there. So that's why I say, everything we do is trying to find a gap. There's a brand that I'm also just about to launch called I'm Halal. The halal market in this country is phenomenal. And the gap is supermarkets won't touch it. And then there's a lot of middle class Muslims who don't want to go around to the bloody corner shop to bloody buy meat. They want organic, they want all stuff. But actually, there is a gap there. So again, it's always about trying to find out, because when I was saying earlier on, the most important thing is focus and passion, because when you're selling it into someone, it's a lot easier to sell it to somebody if you're passionate about it. So that's why I say, it's not just the idea, it's got to be, how is it personal to you? Because that is that's the only thing you could be relying on. Because I always say to people, well, you've got to imagine that somebody's interviewing you, because when you're launching a brand, you've got to create awareness. And the first thing the interviewer is going to say to you, well, why have you created this brand? Now, if you could say, well, I suffered as a child at this and I wanted to do that, then it all starts to make sense. How does it personally link up? That, for me, is the key, which is totally against what the rule of business was in the past. It's all about how can you say, actually, I now understand it, and this is where the passion comes from.
Hi, I think you're amazing. I'm Katie from the Villages Mag in Holmes Chapel. I love your sausages and I love meat. And I love milk. What do you think about this whole veganism thing that's kind of kicked off more in the last 2 years? Do you think it's a fad?
No, I mean, I think, change is good. And it's about where do we see, we do vegan stuff now. So you go onto our website, we will do the stuff. I mean, I don't eat it, but if they want it, you'll do that. And I just think, look, the thing about business is this, and the ones who survive are the ones who actually what they say is catching the zeitgeist. And catching the zeitgeist is that you're slightly ahead before everybody has grasped it. And the reality is that, you know, people, if you think about people with their iPhones and that you could find out more about your health on your iPhone. So the whole thing about being in charge of your own health is becoming big. And so therefore that's going to be including food. So that means if you're in the food business, you can't not take that on board. And therefore I think that it's just going to get bigger. And that I could see a world where actually eating meat will be special. If you think about the amount of people that used to have Sunday lunch, you know, it's now a very, very special occasion. That may happen with meat, really. And then what do we do as things change? So don't be rigid, be flexible, things change. Is that it?
Have we got one more question?
Olivia from Heaton House. You spoke earlier about marketing being fundamental. What's been your favourite or most successful marketing scheme that you've done over the years?
Oh, that's a really good question. I love talking about marketing, especially to this particular audience, because they're cynical about marketing. They're absolutely cynical about it, and they do not believe it. Because you've got to ask yourself, how could a guy that only has 30 acres, you know, is not a real proper farmer, create a big brand out of nothing? That's marketing. So my story is a classic example of actually what marketing is. There's another fantastic story about, those of you might remember VHS and Betamax. When that was launched, Betamax was far superior to VHS, but VHS understood the power of marketing. The reason why people spend a lot of money on marketing is because they understand you could have the best product in the world, people ain't going to buy it unless they're actually made aware of it. And there are two types of marketing. When you're starting off a business, there's below the line and there's above the line. Above the line marketing is where it costs you money, and below the line is where it doesn't cost you money. The most powerful form of marketing is below the line. And actually, below the line is harder work, but that person, so if somebody says to you that you know, oh, you've got to go and see that film, it's really good, you're more likely to go and see it than if you see an advert about it. So what people underestimate is the power of below the line marketing. And that's where all the social media comes in, because actually there are people, they're discovering, it's some sort of discovery they're making. So the instinct, especially from bigger businesses, is to do above the lines. It's costing them money. And, you know, marketing directors for big corporates love that because, you know, some fucking advertising agency goes along and say, well, if you spend X with us, you get these number of people looking at it. And so therefore, the marketing director could go to his chief exec and say, you spent a bloody £1 million. These are the amount of people that looked at it and therefore it was successful. That's bullshit. Below the line, you can't actually, you can't measure. You have to have faith that it's working. And the reason why people don't trust it is because there's no measurement of it. But you have to believe in it and have faith that it's sort of working. That actually, some people go and do above-the-line marketing. They waste their money and they're too early. We did our first ad, you know, a couple of years ago. But before then, all of our marketing was below the line because we understood that is very, very important. And the other thing about marketing is this, is that people expect people to write about them, to notice them, by doing something boring. It's the biggest fun. You're wasting your money if you think that any journalist or anybody is going to be interested in something boring. It's got to be something audacious. It's got to be really something that you go, whoa, now this is a story. And so I'll give you an example. When I was running my PR company, one of the things that we did, when we was working on Plymouth Gin, and I don't remember if you remember that we had this big, was it lunar eclipse when it went dark? And the best place to see that was in Plymouth. And I thought, well, Plymouth Gin is distilled in Plymouth. You got this big eclipse there. I said, right, announce to the whole world, Plymouth Gin sponsors the eclipse. And and people would say, well, you can't say that. And I said, well, who's going to sue you? You know. And so it's about that. It's about being audacious. It's about being bold. No one is going to be interested in actually talking rubbish. And again, that's a mistake that most people make. Is about Everybody has something bold in them. People like me drag it out and say, right, this is the story. This is what people are going to be interested in. They're not interested in things being timid. They're interested in interesting stories. Okay?
Can we show our appreciation again for Wilfred, please?